Welcome, everybody. This is the AIA East Bay Young Architects and Emerging Professionals Program, fireside chat program to discuss diversity in architecture amongst young professionals and young architects. And a topic that I think we all need to talk about more often and just bring to the head of conversations now and not be afraid to ask questions, talk about experiences, and really get to know what's happening in architecture for young professionals coming out of college, as well as those who maybe just got licensed. So we've got a variety of topics we want to talk about in just about an hour. So thanks for everybody for coming to be with us. The Young Architects Forum and Emerging Professionals Committee, we try and put on these types of programs to educate our members in a way that gives them just a new outlook on what's happening inside of our industry, as well as maybe we also do firm tours, we do construction tours, we do a lot of things that are geared towards young professionals to help them grow and become better individuals and help to kind of spread our knowledge to them as they move through the ranks or they move through their career decisions, whether it's right out of college or again, like I said, whether or maybe you're coming to the end of your young architect career and moving into sort of a more veteran position at your firm. It's something that I'm passionate about. Jamie is a co-chair and is co-hosting this event with us. And today we have two very special guests to talk about, again, diversity, mental health, as well as taking the ARE exams is kind of like our extra factor bonus topic if we get to it. And we've got Jessica Gardenhire here. She's coming from the East Coast, or excuse me, from Cleveland, Ohio. So a very special welcome to her. She's a licensed architect in California and a Midwesterner native. She began her architecture career out west to explore a new realm of possibilities. Her early career experiences allowed her to learn about tech campuses, master planning, laboratories, and high-res residential design. In her free time, she loves to stay grounded via yoga, running, and painting. She hopes to explore side passions in 2021 while also giving back to her community via the NOMA, National Organization of Minority Architects, and the local AIA chapter via EDI. Ultimately, she's seeking for a fulfilling career while giving back to after reaching a career milestone of licensure late in 2020. As a young architect until 40, she looks forward to what opportunities licensure will bring her and is incredibly honored to be able to speak with us today. So I appreciate your time. Again, it's 9 o'clock in her time zone. So thank you again, Jessica, for being here.
You're welcome.
Shikha Subramanian is a is a job captain at Dahlin Group in Pleasanton, California, working primarily on affordable housing, and is an active member of NOMA SF and the BIA Bay Area Professional Women in Building Young Professional Group. Is co-coordinating an upcoming series that connects her higher education students with mentors, particularly women of color and diverse career paths in the AEC industry. Shikha and I used to work together at Dahlin Group, and I'm very honored to have her here with us today, and given her expertise in the field of residential architecture, as well as so many other aspects of architecture as well. So thanks for joining us today, and want to again encourage everybody that's here to just kind of chime in, if you will. If you want to join us in the topics that we're discussing, feel free to turn on your microphone and your camera so that we can see you, but as well, just kind of have a really nice informal dialogue about the topic of diversity in architecture for young professionals. So with that, I will start our questions and answers. So this one's going to go for Jessica first. Historically, architecture has been kind of dominated by the older white man presence, and recent polls conducted by the AIA has shown a larger presence of women in the past 10 years. So tell me what you think has happened in our profession to allow that shift and to allow that kind of change in mentality, or maybe it's from the younger professional side of entering into the architecture industry, and give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I believe that it's less about what architecture has done to accommodate more women in the workplace and more about what America and society as a larger whole has done to allow women to enter college and STEM fields in general. When I read this question earlier today, I thought to myself that I I can't trace a timeline in my life where I've been like, oh, architecture is more accommodating to women because it's not great with hours if you want to have kids, if you're the main caretaker. It's not great with the stress and demand load. So I think that it's more so that women in middle school and elementary school and high school are getting empowered to go for careers that are in engineering and architecture in the ACE type of industry and feel confident and supported doing that. So I think if anything, architecture might need to bend a little bit to accommodate how many women are going to college and going into these male dominated fields.
Shika, how about you?
So I agree. I don't think it was so much the industry. I think women kind of said, guys, we're going to do it. And we did. So I think we just noticed it more because we started talking about Me Too a lot more. And a lot of attention was focused on all the great things women are accomplishing now. We've been doing it for a while. And the evidence is in Julia Morgan right there. Some people don't know about her, Bay Area legend. What did I say? California legend. But I know Jamie knows a lot about it. But what I'm trying to get at here is that I think with any sort of conversation that we have about diversity or whatever it may be, people act like it's a groundbreaking thing when we've been talking about it for years and we've been doing it for years. So if anything, I think the voice has just been amplified and empowered. And that's why we're noticing that shift. It's been, you guys are just paying attention. That's what I feel.
And you use the word amplify, which I like because it really starts to do. We got to start talking about how technology and how our voices can be heard more now, and how we can really broadcast our message, no matter what it is. I mean, good or bad. But I mean, do you think that's played also a part in this, or it's just more about really kind of stepping up and being more a part of the conversation on your own, and then seeing how that grows?
I think that social media obviously plays a big role in it, as well as people, like I said, the whole idea of empowerment is finding your voice and using it. I think once we started saying things and people became open to listening, which is the other part of a conversation, is someone needs to be open to listening to what the other person is saying. I think now that there's a two-way connection going on, we are able to raise a lot more awareness about these topics, and that's why people aren't so afraid to talk about it anymore. And that just happens, I think, as we just evolve as a society. That's how we're starting to open, and there's a lot of topics that are not as taboo anymore, and people aren't so afraid to speak about these topics anymore. And that's why we are seeing more and more conversations happen openly. That's why we're having this panel, is because it's not as taboo to talk about it anymore.
Right.
Even a positive spin would be that technology has definitely opened the door for more people to access a plethora of information, including sparking their interest in interior design and architecture and things that they may want to explore and do. So maybe the nature of technology also exposed more people who wanted to come into the field, increasing the diversity of thought as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It feels like we have a bigger voice. We have more opportunities and channels to talk, and therefore these conversations become easier and more accepting about what's happening in our industry. And so that's how I feel. Also, is we're able to see more of each other at an instant and be able to say, look, this is the reality of what's happening here. So. Cool. Jamie, do you want to take the next one?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Happy to be here and happy to get to chat with our guests tonight. So kind of zooming in from that question was about the whole profession. And so now kind of zooming into the idea of individual firms. So I know that companies like to advertise their culture a lot and tout that when recruiting talent. And, they're proud of their culture and they hope that it will help attract talent. But then also many company cultures were probably shaped by predominantly white individuals. So are there any suggestions or observations that you have for companies that can create a culture that is welcoming and can help to foster authenticity for a diverse group of professionals? Yeah, Jessica can go first again, sorry.
Yeah, okay. So I worked on the DEI committee on the last company that I was at, and I it was a good learning experience as to what to not do with such a committee. I would say that most of the time I've raised concerns about things, nothing happens or it takes way too much time to address the issue at hand. I think that my biggest suggestion would be that if someone raises a complaint about something, it probably took a lot for them to even gain the courage to bring up this problem. Especially in the world of diversity and even women in the workplace, it takes a lot to even speak up and say, I have enough out of my, it's beyond my intuition that I need to speak up about this. I have enough evidence to say I need to bring up a problem. So for most people who are trying to figure out their DEI stuff, I would beg them to listen to the complaints that they've already gotten and act a little quicker. If there's a ton of red tape and a ton of things that are stopping you from being able to have a solution to a big problem someone has brought up, that's a red flag. And I say that as someone who's dealt with a lot of issues in the workplace. But on the flip side, what I would say as far as fostering a better company and a more inclusive workplace is also just understanding that people aren't machines. I had a lot of that feeling during COVID, and allowing people to celebrate their cultures, allowing people to have off days, allowing someone to be able to check in and have an actual constructive heart to heart with their higher ups and say, this is what's not working for me, so that you can accommodate a little bit less of the factory thinking that we sometimes get into, where it's not even, that incorporates diversity of thought as well.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for those observations. Shikha, what do you think about that?
I think that we've all heard the saying, like, talk the talk, but you got to walk the walk at the end of the day. And I think that we all saw a bunch of companies, just even outside of architecture, put up a Black Instagram square and say, hey, we're allies, but where are they at now? We've heard crickets after that. So I am a firm believer of, if a company wants to be authentic, they need to show what they're doing and they need to act on it, because action is always going to be louder than words. Action is always going to be louder than the social media post. So for me personally, I'd love to see more firms show their diverse people and amplify their voices, put out blog posts of the great things that your people of color are doing, or your women who are in leadership. I know that one of the biggest compliments that I get when I'm recruiting for my company is how our board is run by a lot of women. And I'm so stoked about that, and I'm excited. I would also love to see companies show more people of color in leadership positions. And if they have programs that are sponsoring and showing how they mentor people of color, why is that not material that's readily available, not only just on your website, but to your own employees? Like, some of them don't even know that these programs exist for them. And I can understand seeing how, oh, we don't want to appear like we're using you guys for marketing. I totally get that. But as someone who is researching firms, not me personally, but like people that I recruit, they're looking at our firms, they're looking at our website, they're looking at our Instagram, they're looking at all our social media. And if we don't reflect what I'm saying as a recruiter to people, what's going on here? You know, and I'm very proud. Just to give a little bit of background about myself, I came from a firm working in Portland, Oregon, and I graduated from the University of Oregon, where I was one of two Indian girls, and both of us are not fully Indian. One of us is Sri Lankan, the other one is half Fijian. So going from that sort of background and leaving Portland because I didn't feel like it was a space for me after a while, and then coming here to the firm that I'm at right now, where I'm happy with the diversity, that to me speaks volumes. But like I said, that I wouldn't have known that if I didn't have this relationship with my firm before. So I would like to see companies act a little bit more than just the Black Instagram square. Let's implement more, let's talk about it more, let's continue the dialogue, and let's figure out a way that we can truly reflect what we're talking about.
I know that when I brought this up with past employers, that the first thing that I usually hear for feedback, as far as me asking why there's not more women or diversity in leadership, because my first firm was also very female led and I was incredibly proud of it. But then you notice that once they did a huge promotion, it was 11 men and 1 woman. And a lot of us were like, what happened? And I think the same lesson can be learned with diversity, as far as, if once you think you've hit a mark, once you've been like, oh, we're such a women-led company, we're doing amazing, it stinks. But if you're not still intentional about it, and if you're not still keeping an eye on the prize of remaining a diverse company, then suddenly you turn around and in the last 15 years, all your senior associates are just men. And it reminds me of a story that another friend was telling me, as far as them being like, oh, I work for a company where they try to recruit only within recommendations from our own peers and from people who already work here. But she's like, we're a majority white tech company. Like, we're not getting any diversity. And I'm like, and we had this conversation since being like, you just at some point have to call out, you need to hire more diversity. You need to hire them intentionally into positions of leadership, because it matters. People see it, and it really does give them a sense of pride to work for that company.
The word that I appreciated that you used right there was intention. Intention is so important when we talk about diversity. And I think so many people kind of miss that point. And it's interesting to hear that, because I think that a lot of people also default to, oh, well, we want to give everybody a level playing field. Okay, that's fine. Nobody's denying that. But if you're going to talk about diversity, be intentional. Be intentional with who you're recruiting. And I think we've hit a point in 2021, maybe I'm being naive and trying to paint, looking at the world with rose-colored lenses, or whatever the saying is, that it should not be shocking that we are talking about diversity and we're talking about hiring more people of color. I don't think it should be a surprise to anybody anymore. And of course it is, not ignoring that. The other thing that I think is really important with continuing the diversity talks and maintaining diverse employees is that it helps reduce turnover, and it helps reduce the fact that so many people who are people of color are dropping out of the industry because they don't feel it's a space for them. And I think that is the biggest travesty that we have in this industry, because there's so much talent and so many voices that are available within those of us who are people of color, that if you have designers that don't represent those cultures behind the tracing paper, how are you going to make people that we're designing for feel welcome? It's our job as architects. Sorry, I'm getting like real loud, my bad. But that's our job as architects. We have to represent those stories. So we have to keep those same designer of colors and people of colors in the design industry. We need those voices. So intention is my biggest thing. I will
don't
hop off my soapbox now.
Nah, don't apologize.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about. This is the soap. This is the platform to talk about this. And to be honest, you bring up a good point. And maybe you said it subliminally, or it's worth repeating again. But just give us our thoughts on why people of color are leaving this industry. What is pushing them to something that's different, or maybe more welcoming in the sense of a professional environment. Is there something more specific or a detail that you noticed in your career that says, man, yeah, that's the reason that person left? Is there anything there you want to expand on? Because I think that's an important point. You're right. People are leaving for a reason, and or maybe again, it's not a welcome environment for them. But if you guys can both expand on that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was going to reveal this organically or not, but I actually had to quit working in June, and I have not had a job since then. It was 90% due to mental health. And unfortunately, I've had 3 nightmare experiences with the architectural field: school, my first job, my second job. I reached such a point of burnout that I just couldn't handle it. And I also very much so felt like between the recruitment process of me like interviewing for, like being the face of interviewing for first my alma mater and then for Howard, and trying to get people to come into the industry, that I felt like it was just very much so a false face of diversity, trying to recruit people to be in a field that I think is psychotically toxic. If an industry has driven me into absolute insanity or trauma or very dangerous health issues multiple times, like I think maybe it's time to pause and say, oh, yikes, it might be the fact that we're encouraging people to not sleep. We're encouraging people to hyper obsess. We're telling people that, like, giving poor deadlines and really unrealistic contracts, at least in my last situation, and being put in a situation where it's like, do you have enough passion for this? And do you care about this? Like, end of the day, this is a job. End of the day, I need to get by. And I really did consider, I'm like, well, I have so many connections with tech. I know so many people at Facebook and Instagram and Google. I could easily just apply to a diversity situation and just become a project manager there and have so much less stress and so much more money. I could leave this industry in a heartbeat. And frankly, I still might do it. It's just unfortunate that it came right after my licensure. And I do plan on pursuing architecture one more time, but I had to get out of California. I had to just say, like, this space, especially the space of false diversity and false promises of saying that we're beyond certain things that I left the Midwest for in order to seek a more inclusive workplace, it has not existed for me. And I'm on this constant pursuit of a space where I can just literally exist and feel as if I can do my job and do an excellent job at it, because I know I'm a very good architect, and thrive without having to deal with whether it be microaggressions or whether it be psychotically unrealistic deadlines that affect my health. Like, end of the day, it's just a job. So that's why I've considered leaving.
I appreciate your very, very honest and authentic answer.
Absolutely. Yep.
You're being super brave about
Thank you.
saying that. It breaks my heart that you're thinking about leaving, because, sorry, Tim, I cut you off, my bad. But
No, it's fine. Yeah.
My biggest thing, I'm actually kind of approaching it. I feel those feelings as well, but I'm choosing to stay in architecture for 2 reasons. First of all, I don't know what I do with my life outside of architecture.
Me too.
I don't know. I have no idea what I would do. Maybe I would just talk all day. That's no. But so I don't know what I would want to do with my life if I didn't do architecture. The other thing is that I know that if I leave, the next Fijian architect won't have somebody to look up to. And I'm not saying that I'm great and like people should look up to me. That's not true at all. But what I'm saying is that I'm one less person to be a role model for the next generation of Pacific Islander architects. And I don't think that's fair. And one of the biggest things that one of my friends told me back in Portland, I was having a really bad day. I was having a toxic day. And I was kind of sitting there, I was crying because I'm a person with feelings. And my coworker came up to me, he's like, why are you sad? I was like, I put up this building and so-and-so tore it apart and it was a crappy design. And the guy just kind of looked at me, he's like, so what, you're not a designer? And I was like, well, then what's my purpose? He just kind of looked at me and he was like, we're in architecture. There's so many other things you can do other than being a designer. And it clicked for me. And that's when I refound out my why. My why is now I look at putting up affordable housing units. I'm contributing to that cause. I look at, okay, I'm providing mentorship for the next generation of architects, for those people that feel like architecture isn't a space for them, or they have that shock when they come out of school and go into the firm and they're like, oh my God, I picked the wrong major. I'm here to ease that anxiety for them. That is what I do. I don't come out and say I'm a designer or I'm an architect right away. Depends on who I'm talking to. But if I'm talking to someone who's in the know, I let them know, well, I mentor. That's what I do. I help you get your license. I help this. I help that. I help you feel better. And I try to put up that front before I put up the front that I'm an affordable housing architect or designer.
Oh, it's great insight. Yeah, thank you both. And Jessica, I just wanted to circle back. You brought up a point about just being more vocal and saying something when it matters or when it bothers you, and in terms of if there's something going on in the workplace, and you had mentioned, a lot of times as a person of color, you might just say, okay, well, I'll let that go, or I'll let that slide, and then maybe the next time, or you'll have to create or gather evidence as a way to bring that up as an issue. I just think that's so important to say, step back and say, look, you asking for help is not should not be an issue, should not be something that people are hesitant about. And asking for support, resources, basic stuff in a professional work environment, and to sit here and say like, oh my gosh, I needed to, gather evidence, or I needed to be, I was a little hesitant on asking for help. I just think it's so important for people to hear, is like, that should not be a barrier. That should not be a hurdle. That should not be something that you have to pause and say, wait a second, did someone else have this issue? Because I don't want to be the only one. And that plays right into mental health, in the sense like, we need to be, just speaking up, and I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that, or maybe other experiences you had. It's just like, it just becomes so important for people to hear you say that as well. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would say that it's a major red flag if it's like part of the company culture to not be able to go to HR with certain things. And I guess that's the nature of also being in a firm that's large enough to need an HR. I know that that's definitely something I've talked to many people about, as far as like trying to avoid certain types of environments. But I think that, and I also want to preface by saying that there's good and bad in everything. Like, by all means, like I said, that I had like 3 pretty tragic experiences within architecture, but also like I can see the bright side as well. There's people I absolutely love from my school experience and from both of the firms that I've worked at. But I I will admit there are 2 very clear cases where I should have sued one of the companies that I was at for harassment. And it hurts when you're in the type of office where something so obvious is happening in a very public setting, and it is a victim who is expected to speak up. And it touched me more than anything, just the tiniest little feeling of alliance from a bystander who would be like, this isn't normal. And like, but so I I don't really want to expand on it, just because I do love the company that I'm referencing, and it was one of a few very bad incidences. But as far as asking for help, that's also a red flag. I have never worked at a firm like this. I've always gone to places that have open door policies, but as far as expanding your knowledge as a young architect, you do not want to be at a firm where if you go and ask somebody for help on something that was assigned to you and they're like, oh God, figure it out yourself, Google it. Like, why? I hired you so that you could draw this detail for me, like, not like, go get it done. That's not the place you want to work at. You want to be somewhere. I'm so thankful for this experience where I could be at a firm where an older project architect had the amount of time to sit me down with a drawing set and show me how to go through and pick up red marks, how to understand an entire drawing set, because they don't teach you that in school. And it really is the job of us in the industry who are working to make sure to mentor the people that we're training and mentor the younger generation. And I look forward to being in an office where I can also have people's back and just also be a good ally, because that's something that I needed so many times in my life. So it if your projects are going so fast, or at such a pace, or if the culture is so pressure cooker like that they don't even have the time to answer your questions and have a calm open door convo like that, it's not you. You're not the problem. You need to go to a new firm.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
off, Jessica.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just wanted to add to that, like, that's 1000% one of the many reasons why I left another firm. And it's because someone blatantly told me, like, hey, there were 2 leaders in this company, and one of them said, hey, if you need help, you can come to us. And then the other part stood there and said, I will hand your paper back to you. And I think that is absolute garbage. And I will shout that from the rooftop. I think that there is this generational divide in a lot of firms, not saying all, but a lot of firms, where people feel that the older generation can express this sort of rite of passage. I suffered and I went through all this hard work. You should too. And that, sure, to have your feelings. You're allowed to feel that way. But I think it's an incredible disservice to deny someone resource and assistance to pave that path to be easier for somebody else, not because it discredits your story, because that's how you keep talent and that's how you encourage people to stay within an industry. You offer to teach them. That some people are not cut out to be teachers. That's fine. Find somebody else who can also offer and be willing to teach. And also, like with teaching, that's how you reinforce how you know something. It's super important. And so I'm really glad that that's the other important reason why I think we should all talk about our anxieties. We should talk about what worked and what didn't, because it humanizes your experience and validates your feelings so you don't feel so alone. You don't need to be isolated. I can guarantee what those thoughts that are in your head. This is me talking to all the young professionals listening to this. If you feel like it's just you, it's not just you. I promise you that. Just talk to somebody. And if they don't want to listen, find somebody else. They're gonna listen to you. And if you can't find anybody, you have this network with the AIA, you have NOMA, you have Young Architects, there's so many groups where people are talking about it, and just take advantage and look for them. We're here for you guys. Shoot, reach out to me.
Good point. That's a good point. There are a lot of resources, including the AIA, Young Architects, San Francisco. Don't be shy. Circling back to what we were just talking about. Don't be afraid to speak up. Yeah. We're a little over a halfway point. I want to pause for a second and address one of the questions we got in the audience. And again, encourage everybody that's here to speak up, chime in. Definitely contribute if you feel like you want to jump in. This is an open conversation that we want to have with everybody. I appreciate everybody listening and hanging out here. But Kat Davis said, how do you, and we're going to jump around to the licensure thing now, and kind of ties into some of the things we were talking about. How do you view the licensure process from a person of color point of view? How can we be more radical in ensuring the continued growth of diversity in the field? Kind of two questions there. Shikha, if you want to start, you want to jump on that one.
So full disclosure, I'm not licensed yet.
I know.
I'm not licensed
Jessica
yet.
You're an emerging. You're seeking licensure though, right? Aren't you?
I am, and I'm not going to quit. Actually, a lot of are in my my ARE study group that I started at work. I started this study group as sort of a means of accountability. And it's really funny because for those of you who hopped on the call earlier, I attended 4 weddings this year and I had no time to study. And that sucks coming off of a fail. And I felt really jaded, and I wasn't attending the study group that I'm hosting. But there is one of my colleagues who's there for every single meeting, whether or not I'm there or not. And he is the reason why I'm so motivated to study for my AREs, because I want to show up for my group just like my group shows up for me. And I appreciate every single one of you. If you're on this call or if you're not, I appreciate all of you having my back, and I'm going to continue to have yours. In terms of being a person of color pursuing licensure, it's those statistics. It's seeing that percentage of licensed architects. So I think it's like 0.3% for Pacific Islander. And I'm like, I'm not fond of that number. And I want to know that I contributed to something much bigger by changing that percentage number. And that's the reason why I ride so hard for passing my AREs. I do think that even though standardized tests, we all have an opinion about them. And even though the idea is to assess everybody at the same level and the same playing field, we have to acknowledge that not everybody has an equal playing field from the get-go. So I think that we need to look at potentially more resources that are available. I know NOMA SF is now paying for an ARE test for their members. That's huge. NOMA National did their 50 by 50. This was their 50th year for their conference, and they wanted to bring in 50 new NOMA members as a licensed architect. I didn't attend NOMACon this year, but I think they made it. I don't know, Jessica, maybe you can validate that, but they helped by partnering with Black Spectacles to offer their product at a discounted rate. Those sort of programs are great, but it can't be just NOMA that's doing it. AIA can back it up, and your own firm can back it up as well. And a lot of us are very blessed to work at firms where they do back it up, but some of us are not as lucky. So where are the resources for other people to help level out that playing field a little bit more? We're not saying rewrite the test, but we're saying give the assistance where you need it. And it's not just for people of color. What about those of us who have dyslexia, or those of us who have learning disabilities? How are we going to help with those needs to bring these numbers up. That's what I've got to say about the AREs. Jeff, got any study tips for me? I'll take them. I have.
Hey, yeah. Okay, I have to share this because it's a little bit funny, but I also didn't attend the NOMA conference despite being 2 hours away. I was actually in the city that day for my friend's baby shower, who's like spoken at NOMA, and like I was there with one of the board members at my friend's baby shower, but literally we were at the baby shower being like, we can't afford it this year. So yeah, because it was kind of funny. And that one of my friends, she's like, yeah, you got called during the licensure honoring. I'm like, I wish you took a picture for me. But so yes, thank you to my friend Amani for letting me know I was up there. So I don't know if we reached the 50 by 50 mark. I will also be transparent and say that I took a pause from my role as NOMA San Francisco historian in order to move across the country. And it was just, it's too much with me being in a different time zone. But I love that organization. I've been a part of it since I was a student. I would say that NOMA is the reason I was able to stay motivated to graduate from Cornell, as well as gain architectural licensure. But back to the actual question of how can we be more radical within getting more diversity in architecture, and as well as like what my license process was from the point of view of being a person of color. I was very motivated by the first 500 goal. I was 501. So don't know what that means. It's the goal was to get 500 African American female architects licensed. And I was also very touched by one of my friends who said, it doesn't matter if you're 500, 600, there's always going to be a new goal. Do it for yourself. So because it really is a self-driven process. And one of my ideas as far as how to be more radical and how we get more people licensed is, I think more people and even firms could sponsor scholarships for even study materials. I think that people may not realize how hard it is if your firm does not support your purchase of whether it be Black Spectacles or Amber Book, or I can't remember the one that I loved so much that was affordable right now. It'll come to me later. But but there's all these different programs. It's the one by Ben Norkin. It'll come to me. And
Hyperfine.
Thank you. Hyperfine. So it's really hard to start stacking up all these things plus the books that you need, because 5.0 is insane. I transitioned from 4.0 to 5.0, and 5.0 is psychotic. It's a lot, and you really do need a ton of resources for it. So frankly, I think that my perspective as a person of color was also that I'm like, a lot of us are too broke to handle this. A lot of us do not have the financial stability in order to casually toss $2,000 at something and then knowing it has such a high failure rate. And unfortunately, a lot of recent college grads who are people of color also have a much higher statistic likeliness of needing to support their family. I know my first year out of college, living in San Francisco on a very low salary, I had to help pay my parents' mortgage because they bought a house that year. I had to help send a little bit money so they could cover taxes. And I have many other friends who are in that situation and being like, oh, you now make enough money to help your parents out. So like stuff like that does kind of get in the way. So I think more scholarships, helping people get more funding, understanding that that people need a little more push to get it over these tests.
Absolutely. Yeah, great point. I mean, it's not cheap to get licensed as an architect, and you already, I mean, all anybody who's been licensed recently understands that it's not only a mental grind, it's a physical as well as financial grind to get through. Even starting through college. I mean, geez, I mean, going to Cornell, getting licensed, all the resources, ARE boot camps, you know, it's a process that's years. I mean, not 1-2 years, it's multiple years. And I know I could say took me 4 years to get licensed, then college, you know, all that stuff. It adds up. And you know, we go back to being, are you passionate about this profession enough to do it? And that's a real question that a lot of young professionals have to ask themselves, because it's a grind to get through it. So we're flying through the program here with 15 minutes left. Jamie, do you want to ask one of your
Sure.
questions?
Yeah, I'll ask another question. Sure. Yeah. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing those experiences. And I think like touching on that mental health point, I think that will help a lot of people to hear that, people are feeling that themselves, because I think that's not talked about enough. And so people like you all were saying, might not know that what other people are going through, and that, in your own small way, you can lead for positive change, whether it's in the profession or out of the profession, or, and hopefully people get that message. Like if people are leaving the profession, that they can hear that like, hey, that's a red flag. That's something that those are who are still in the profession, should do something about. So my question is, I noticed that millennials somewhat, but Gen Z even more so, seem to have a growing awareness of mental health. And that seems like a great thing as we all, matriculate through the profession. So what changes would you hope to see in the profession as that mental health awareness has an impact over time, when people get into have a little bit more impact in the profession and a little bit more leadership roles? Shikha, do you want to go first today?
Sure. So mental health, my favorite topic. What I would like to see happen, and this is America as a workplace, and not forget about architecture for a second. I would love to see more healthcare coverage for therapy, because a lot of people don't go to therapy because they simply can't afford it. And I think that we are also seeing this shift in this generation, in that people are acknowledging that anxiety is a very real thing and it needs to be addressed. So I would love to see health insurance coverage, not just for regular therapy, but also for online therapy, because a lot of us, like we said, we don't have the time to haul ourselves over. COVID, changed how we do therapy. It would be awesome to see how healthcare and companies would help support that, even if it's like in-house counseling, whatever it may be, something that address that anxiety is something that's real and it's not a made-up notion. We are advanced enough as a people to understand that mental health is a real thing. The second thing that I would like to talk about, sorry, I'm looking at my notes, fully transparent. I would like to see more work boundaries being acknowledged and set and kept and respected. And that became really hard when we all came home to work, because it's very easy to blur those lines between, oh, I can do this deadline after 5 o'clock. I can do this XYZ. But for every part that you're asking your project manager to not email you after hours, you have to also be equally responsible to hold those boundaries. You have to put your phone away at 6 o'clock, your work phone or whatever it may be. You also have to sit there and speak up and advocate for yourself and say like, hey, I kind of need a break. I'm going to take that 20-minute walk or whatever it may be. And in therapy, full disclosure, I went to therapy. That's why I feel very confident right now. But one of the biggest things that I learned in therapy is that when something is not going right in your life and it's a pattern, you set up a boundary. And that boundary, if you hold it, the person that is creating the pattern or creating the attack that triggers you gets so shocked by the boundary that they have to figure out a new approach on how to talk to you. And usually it's positive. So a lot of us set those work boundaries, but that one time you answer the email at 6 o'clock, all of a sudden you're going to get a bunch of emails at 6 o'clock. So for people who feel burnt out and stressed, draw those lines for yourself. And, even if you have to mark it in your calendar as time that you're out of office, do it. So I would say maintaining work boundaries, promoting therapy and, providing those resources for people who may need it. And also, I think with work from home, we also learned that we all kind of like our families. We kind of like our kids. We kind of like our pets. We like to spend time with them. We also like the midday workout or whatever it may be. And we became healthier in that sense too, because people acknowledge like, oh, hey, maybe I don't have to spend 2 hours in a commute. When I was studying for my AREs, I didn't go to work into the office because I saved 2 hours of my day to give back to studying. Respecting that people are human and respecting that we have a personal life outside of being architects. That is not only a way to protect your own mental health and your employees' mental health, it shows that you value us and it shows that you give us worth because you recognize that we're human beings. And that acknowledgement in itself is super important. And the last thing I would like to leave you guys with, and then I'll hand it over to Jessica, is those days that you wake up and you're not motivated, or you feel like, what is the point? Why am I here? Why do I want to do this? All of that crap. Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself. Be gracious. Be kind. We're in a whole panini right now, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, Panda Express. We're in it, and we're surviving, and we're thriving, and we're alive, and you're here, and you're functioning. That's worth celebrating. So please, like, be forgiving of yourself. If you do that and you acknowledge it and give yourself the gold star, you're not soft. You're being human, and you're respecting yourself.
Thanks, Shikha. All right, Jessica, what do you have for us?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all that, Shikha. I honestly second everything you said. I've had a lot of similar experiences. The only thing I would add is also that it takes a manager to also acknowledge that it's a tough time, that you can have off days. And I really appreciated one of my managers at my last job who did reach out to me and call me actually in June of 2020 and tell me that it's okay if I needed to have off days. It's okay if I felt the effects of the Black Lives Matter movement and the racial riots that were happening around the death of George Floyd at the time. And it really touched me that he called me and said, hey, if you're having an off day, it's okay. Let me know. And I was really thankful that I had a really good project team and a really supportive project team and good realistic deadlines so that we could meet goals in order to do that. And the only thing that I'll also add as far as the work boundaries, because that's something I was very good at with my first job, maybe because I don't know, I had an attitude. I have no idea, but I was very much so like, I've got a schedule, I'm out of here. And it's convenient when you have a train that you have to catch when I was getting on Caltrain all the time. But it is a lot harder to set a realistic work boundary when you don't have realistic deadlines. And I think COVID put the construction industry in a place once again to set really unrealistic deadlines. So we got to be better managers too. Like now that I'm licensed and I need to step into more managerial and roles, we have to remember, like, don't overpromise. It's going to bite you.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. Want to open it up to an old friend of mine, Annette. You had a question? Did you want to jump in here? It's good to see you.
Tim and Shikha and Jamie, great to meet you, Jessica. I used to work back at Dell & Group, like, I don't know, it's been like 10 years or something. But this conversation definitely echoes many of the things that are happening in my mind right now. For one, this idea of someone that looks like you and also like shares the experience of being an other or being an outsider. And then you come into these dialogues where they're talking about making buildings for the community. And then we're sort of like, well, like, what is this ambiguous idea of the community? And that's where it's extremely important for people of color to be involved, because who's defining what community means is extremely important. And then within the office, you hear conversations about people of color like, oh, those people, we're not going to do this for those people. And it's like, you find yourself just being like, well, who do you think you are, running your mouth about, I feel like I understand the burnout, and I understand the tiredness, and I understand feeling like you don't belong because you're like some way ethnic, and just it's exhausting to to fight that fight all the time. I have like a bunch of statements. Hopefully I'll have a question in there somewhere. But I also understand that standing up for people is super important. Like, if you hear someone saying you can't understand someone because of their accent, or you hear someone mispronouncing a last name, like the CEO of the last company I worked for called me Annette Diaz a million times, and like, I worked for him for 4 years. So it's just like, come on, you can learn my name at this point, And also this idea of being like the token person of color at a meeting. Like, I found myself struggling between being offended and being like, maybe this is my opportunity. It's like, people generally promote other people that look like them and that remind them of themselves. I don't remind any like person in leadership of themselves because I'm this like random, quirky, weird, whatever. I will say too that in the past couple of years, I've been freelancing. I had a son 3 years ago, and it kind of like threw me way off of what is architecture, who am I in this industry? And I feel like freelancing has been so eye-opening for me because it comes to this idea of worthiness, and you have to reconcile your worthiness with yourself and not with leadership at a firm and all these people who are defining what your identity is and what you mean and how much you can earn. And I feel like I'm working directly with homeowners and different clients and whatever, and it just, the idea of worthiness and realizing that I felt so worthless in the industry when I was working for firms, and then putting it back in my hands and being able to muscle it into a better place has felt better for me, is in like finding myself. But I do like, I think that it's a different playing field between people of color and people that easily belong in the industry. You're fighting whether you deserve to be there. If you're in a role where you're considered for leadership, you're constantly wondering, was I passed up because people are just not thinking about me as an option? Like, I'm fully capable, I have all these skills, there's no reason I shouldn't be considered for, like, I feel like that's one thing, like, that's for me is the question I have is like, how hard, this has been like my struggle, is how hard do you have to fight to get people to see you? I think at the end of the day, I've come to the realization that you have to find your allies and you have to work for people that are your allies. If you're going to always have to fight for a simple thing like include me in the client meeting, email me, meeting notes when something happens, like include me. If you have to beg to be included, there's already a problem with how that's working. So I know I'm kind of ranting here, but you guys have just like, I've just been over here like on the edge of my seat. So I'm done with the info dump.
I loved
That's-
the rant. I
That's
loved
perfectly
it.
fine. Yeah, that's what this is all about. This is what. Yeah, I'm glad you spoke up. I'm going to let our guest, obviously, if you guys want to respond or you want to talk about it some more, feel free. I'll open that up.
I loved what you had to share. And I feel the same tug of war within myself often. The only, like, I wanted to make sure I wrote it down that you feel as if people won't relate to you because you're some random quirky person of color that they can't see. Frankly, I think me being quirky and being myself helped my first boss and principal see so much potential in me because I think she was reminded of herself so much. So I did receive a lot of support. I was so thankful that the principal like saw me as a mini me of her. So stay random and quirky. That's definitely some of my advice for everybody else listening. Make sure that you professionally still like be professional, but let yourself be yourself and be in an office where you can be yourself. And I agree. It's better to work for allies. It's 100% better to work for people you can see as allies. If you feel that weird, gross feeling of like, I don't belong here, you probably don't.
So Annette, I want you to know that you mattered to me when I was an intern at Dahlin, and you were my quirky role model because I'm pretty damn quirky. And I don't know if you remember that, but
Dude, Shikha, like
girl,
I was wondering if I was going to bring up the story or not, but
when we went to Bevmo, I'll say it.
no, the Bevmo story, I was talking about like how someone mistook me for you.
Yeah. Oh,
And then we
I
had
remember
this
when
whole
you
like
emailed me
running
about
joke.
that.
I was walking through the office and someone was like, hey, what's happening with this project? And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm like, oh, they think I'm Shikha because there's not enough people like me and Shikha here. So they just like think we're the same person.
Yeah, and I remember in my little internship farewell email, we talked about this to a great extent. And also that happened to me when I went back to school with the other Indian girl who was at school. But what I'm trying to get at is that this is an example to everybody what I was talking about with turnover. So when you think you don't matter, you matter to somebody. So like Annette mattered to me because she was my friend. And above that, she was someone that I could look up to because she was established in her career and I was starting my career. But this is why these conversations and having them be open dialogue and retention is important. This example right here, you're seeing it live.
I literally got chills when you said that.
Well, it mattered. And I never had the opportunity to tell you that because you were gone when I came back. So I was like, what? But I'm glad that I'm able to tell you this. This is an incredibly rare opportunity that I can look at you and tell you that your voice mattered to me. And that's a lot of the reason why I want to stay in architecture and why I want to continue doing what I'm doing. And I agree with what everybody's saying here. It is way better to work for the allies, and it's way better to work with people who understand your story, who when you look at them and say, hey, I'm 30 years old and I have to tell my mom where I'm at consistently because I am brown and that is my
That's
culture.
right.
So like, you know, and I have to acknowledge these things. And if I don't have to explain that any further, then, you know, it's kind of nice and I can actually focus on the job or whatever it may be. But at the same time, it is not lost on me, my personality, and that I kind of come in wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And, you know, like I'm very out there and I have a personality where I'm not afraid to speak up, but I'm going to take full advantage of that and kind of elbow my way to make a seat at this table for myself because God gave me this personality. God gave me this voice and I'm going to use it. If I don't, then I'm wasting my talents in that point. So what I want to do is, I know that I'm a very rare unicorn in architecture in that most of us are introverts and we don't speak up that much and we don't talk as much as I do, which is fine. That's okay. But if you do find that day where you feel a little bit more empowered to speak up and say something, you know, poke a little elbow in there. No one's going to get hurt. I promise. Just say, excuse me, and you'll be fine. I promise that. So I'm going to continue to kind of shimmy my way in and until, you know, I find that opportunity that's going to fit in for me, because I know that maybe at the end of the day, I matter to somebody just like Annette mattered to me. So I'm going to continue to do that inspiration. And that's why I stay in architecture right then and there. And Annette, I'm so glad you had your moment where you talked about all of these feelings, because again, the more and more we talk about it, the more and more we can't ignore it. So that's super important. Thank you so much, Fred.
Yeah, thanks for jumping in the conversation, Annette. I have to circle back on what you said, just kind of like Jessica. You know, you bring up a really great point about worthiness in the sense that, you know, feeling the worthiness from others around you. And you brought up a really great point too about this industry that needs to be said out loud, and how firm owners, older white men, firm owners are promoting people who look like them. And that's a reality. And I hate to say that. And obviously it's a point that's probably been experienced by a lot of people in this industry for the past, I would say at least 50 years, and if not more. And it's just something that we all need to hear and to digest, either consciously, subconsciously, or continue to have those conversations with upper management in our respective architecture firms or wherever or workplaces in general, not just architecture. And so I felt like, and we need to say that out loud again, because it's something that's a reality that people know and acknowledge. It's just doesn't get said. And like you said, you go on your career being like, wait, what is it? Did I just get passed up for some dude who just came in here and just got hired, and I've been here for 5 years, 10 years, and I've been doing a good job, the best I can. And you start questioning the fact, like, okay, why am I here? What is this the right environment for me, etc. So yeah, thank
Tim,
you for bringing that up.
I have to say too that I don't even know if they acknowledge it. Like, I think that it's so like they're just doing it, like they're, you know, and I've been in this practice where, you know, when I look at a firm, I look at who their people in leadership are, and I'm looking at if there's people of color, if there's women, and then it's been one of my interview questions, and it always stumbles people because they're just not thinking about it. And like, I get what you're saying. I'm not like just trying to contradict you, but I just really think that, you know, they're like, you're not going to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, which is like sometimes promoting a person that is way different from you can be very uncomfortable. You know, how do you talk about certain things? And like, how do you talk about your weekend when they had a very cultural weekend and you had like, you know, you just want to get rid of the weird identity crisis and like somehow those people have to be okay with being uncomfortable because we're uncomfortable all the time. So like, come on, take some of it, you know?
The other thing I learned in therapy, other than boundaries, is that without being uncomfortable, you don't grow as a person. Free therapy. You guys can co-pay me $20.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
so I will admit that I went in like guns blazing once to my first job's office, like during a check, and I was like, what is going on with the diversity of this firm? Like, why aren't you addressing this? And it's a mix of they don't think about it in some firms, but then there's also the flip side of something that frustrated me so much in the Bay Area that I did not expect was that it's the reflex to immediately have very like 1990s, like melting pot ready diversity phrases ready to go, being like, oh, I don't see color, or saying something in regards of like, oh, I like, oh, well, we're beyond that in our institute, like, so we just give raises based off merit. It's like, I get that, but then look around, there's still a problem. And also I hope everyone learned this by 2016, but I don't think so. But most people of color don't want to hear you say you don't see color. It's completely psychotic. But I think we know that as architects, we love color, we are obsessed with color, we will argue over something's, you know, royal blue or dark blue, like I think, but still, like, most people are like, I want you to just allow my diversity to be here and thrive. I don't want to not be seen. I want to be able to exist and thrive. So like, you know, maybe if the goal of promoting this person is to have a, I don't know, cigar smoking and golf weekend with all the CEOs, which doesn't really happen in our industry, like maybe that's why you can't imagine bringing a person of color who's a woman to this retreat. But I don't see that happening too much in our industry, especially in San Francisco during, or in the Bay Area, like during this time, as far as having super broy, call it like country club retreat type things. But I will admit that it's very quick to get the knee-jerk reaction of being like, oh, we don't see color, we don't do things like this. And I guess that's goes back to it being like, then you have to pause and think, we have to foster and mentor people that are clearly talented people of color and give a little bit of bias so that we can undo all the systemic racism. Because quite frankly, Annette, when you were talking, I also wrote down the thing about worthiness, because I was like, that's very true. These firms make you feel worthless. And there's a flip side of it, that if you cannot code switch, if you cannot thrive in white spaces, if you can't draw a sharp line between who you are as a diverse person and of the person around your people versus who you are when you walk in that office door, and be so dual minded, you're not going to have a seat at the table. And that's just respectability politics and a bigger problem with America, I'd say. But I'll admit, you guys can tell by how I speak, I went to an all white high school. I ended up at Cornell. That was the most diverse place I'd ever been in my life, which is great. It's a very diverse Ivy, but also like, that's a joke. That's a joke in and of itself. So like, I'll admit, it's the people who were taught how to thrive in white spaces that get to thrive in white spaces. And that's not necessarily fair either. And my last point is that everybody's biased. Everyone. It's almost like you got to play the bias cards. Because I had this conversation while trying to pick recruits with an Asian coworker of mine, and I kind of called him out on him trying to favor people who needed help with immigration status. I'm like, it's not our job to do this. We just have to pick the best person. So we had a really good deep convo about bias, and I was like, hey, we're all going to be biased. We got to take from all these really talented people and kind of make sure that we're not just giving like 5 people who need this help getting a green card. We need to like have a few people like this, a few people like that. Like we have to mix it up. So it was a fun convo we had.
So one quick thing I want to pivot off of that real quickly is, when you get, if you've heard I don't see color, or you say something like that, you are discrediting somebody's identity in that moment. It's just the one thing that I want everyone to keep in mind when you're trying to be an ally and you say things like that. By saying we don't see color or we don't have a diversity issue, you are burying the problem and you are taking away my identity or somebody else's identity. And that's probably more hurtful than not giving me the job.
Mhm. There's something that Jessica said early on that I think was so valuable. I just wanted to come back to, and sorry, I lost my internet. So if you joined on my phone, but that it's really like a consistent work to continue achieving diversity, that we don't ever say like we did it and then we stop. So I think that's a really, really important point to keep remembering, because even if we are comparatively more diverse than another firm or the professional as a whole, there could still certainly be individual cases or still a lot of work that we can do to keep improving. So I think that's important to think about.
And I think what the real interesting part is too is architecture is such a diverse industry in itself. It lends itself to say, hey, look, it as a profession, it seems to be accepting of all kinds of talents and abilities and mental states, and just the creative factor that goes into architecture really is like, it's such a diverse profession in itself as a way you can design, or you can be technology driven for climate, and still be an architect, quote unquote. So it's like, I don't know why it's always historically just gone down one route and really just not lend itself to other people of interest, of color, of cultures. It just seems like the perfect environment, but it really hasn't. And so that's where my confusion comes in too, is like, this seems like a platform that should just lend itself with open arms to a variety of people. And so anyways, that's where I'm like, I just don't get it. I don't understand. But in America, it's a whole nother issue as well, in terms of, I think, Jessica, you kind of started to mention that as well, as this America as a culture is just kind of in that realm of keeping people down, of really kind of separating people of color from white people, or certain cultures from white people. And it's like, why are we doing this still? What's happening in this country that has created such a divide amongst people, from white people to everybody else? It seems like there's such a huge gap that really just can't be broken. And it's very cyclical. You can go back centuries, and especially early 1800s, early 1900s, where this is just, I feel like it's coming back. I mean, I feel like civil war is going to happen again in this country because of how people treat each other. And again, we're getting off a topic from the architecture side, but deep rooted, this country is supporting people to be racist and be discriminatory towards people just because of how they look. And it's mind-boggling. It's crazy to think we're having this conversation in 2021, but it's so real.
And I don't think architects can fix this, but unfortunately, I think that the housing segregation that is what this country was founded on is the root of all of these problems. If we forced integration, then you'd have forcibly integrated schools. You'd have your children playing with other people of color. You'd be exposed face to face to more people that looked like you. There'd be housing values that are more equal, so there'd be more equal wealth versus the insane wealth gap that there is. So, like, it's, if anyone listens to NPR Code Switch, there's a joke that they used to say to each other, being like, well, housing segregation and everything. That'd just be this running line that every time they research something, they'd be like, oh shoot, it comes down to housing segregation. So we as architects can't necessarily do that as far as reversing, who has a mortgage in the neighborhoods that we're designing in, but it is insane to sit and look at the effect of that to this day.
Well, you brought up a good point about the mortgage factor. I mean, they used to write into mortgages, people of color could not purchase this house. And that right there defined neighborhoods going forward. And even to this
Why do
day,
you think
can
my
still find
parents
those
just bought
deeds.
their first home?
Yeah,
It sucks, but they couldn't.
right.
You still see the effects of it in Portland.
Yeah.
There. And this was a big conversation in NomaCon last year, was talking about housing segregation and also how do we get more Black ownership over property. And it's such a huge, and while yes, it's an overall systematic haul, I think there are small portions that architects can contribute to. For example, what kind of clients are you working for? Where do their goals align? Are you in nonprofits? What do those nonprofits align with? Yes, we don't directly affect the system, but we do play small roles in it. A lot of the organizations that we're involved with out here have to deal with housing policy. They lobby. So why are they not lobbying for housing segregation or like desegregation? And sorry, that was the wrong word, but you guys get what I mean? Like, you can still lobby, you can still bring policy. There are people in our industry who are doing it who can get lumber prices down. So why is that same energy not being brought to desegregation laws? We have small pieces. We're all part of this puzzle and we can contribute, but it has to be collective. We have to all recognize that it can't be just one person or one industry turning it over. It has to be a collective and collaborative effort.
Yeah, I mean, housing is such, yeah, I mean, Jessica, I think you hit it right on the head. Housing, and even to think here in the Bay Area, I know you're in Cleveland right now, but the Bay Area, you think is such a diverse community of people. The displacement of people in housing in Bay Area is so prevalent. It's happening, and it in the, you know, it starts, the epicenter starts in San Francisco and just radiates out, pushing people beyond their limits, which creates an even further problem of, you know, people having to commute into areas now. And anyways, that's a whole nother topic. We could talk about housing industry in America and in certain communities and how that's played a part into it. But we're over on time. It's about 7:17. I want to give both of you an opportunity to say some last words. Tell us what you're doing. Jessica, you got a really great opportunity coming at Young Architects Conference. Maybe you want to talk about that. And then we can just kind of we can kind of lead off of that. So yeah, go take it away for a second.
Yeah. Well, I actually spoke at the last conference. What opportunity? Was that it?
Oh yeah, that was it. I mean,
fun.
yeah, talking about the panel.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
from the
Okay,
conference.
so I was on a panel at the Young Architects Summer Series. I was like, wait, is there something else I signed up for?
No.
And it was incredible. It was with so Michael Rusika gave us a platform, and I am so thankful to my fellow panelists, especially Tim, who I asked to MC for us. We had a really good conversation about diversity in architecture that was really raw and uncut and organic. I think it was very well represented of many people, and I do want to make sure that one of the messages that I want to convey from many of our hearts is that, like, from that panel, is that you don't have to be a stallion for diversity if you don't want to in your office. Sometimes it feels like that sticker is shoved on you. And I really appreciated one of our Latina representatives who was like, what? I just show up and do my job and like I don't even really think about it. So if that's the world you want to live in and occupy, like, good for you. It's actually empowering that you can even do that. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm in Cleveland right now. I lived in San Mateo for 4 years and then San Francisco for 3 years. I loved it. I had a wonderful time there, but unfortunately I decided when it was time for me to take a break from architecture for a little bit that I wanted to not pay rent there anymore. So I am back in my hometown in Cleveland, and I'll probably be transitioning to a completely different city after the holidays. I'll keep it a secret, but I'm in a fun transition period. I wish we could have answered more questions about the exams, but like I said, I don't know. But if I can think of one good tidbit of advice for the exams, I'll think about it. But they're hard. Do it for yourself, and failure will happen. But yeah, that's a
learn by failing, isn't that right? Or something like that. Learn by doing, then also learn by failing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know we
It's
didn't get to
hard
the
to fail. It's
topics.
hard.
Yeah, we didn't get to
But
the topics of the tests. So maybe we'll have to have you back to talk about that and expand on taking AREs during COVID, as well as other struggles that go along with taking the AREs and the CSE too. So
oh yeah. Ha! It's bad. Yeah.
Shikha, you're studying right now. Do you want to give any tips or anything you want to share with everybody going forward, or what you got going on?
Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. For the Aries, I'm harsh on myself. And most of y'all know me, I am so critical of myself. And I think that one of the best pieces of advice, and this can go for the exam perhaps, and for anything else in your life, well, in terms of like architecture itself, think like an architect, but always remember that you're a human being first. So honor your feelings, respect your feelings, be gracious to yourself, be kind to yourself, because your voice is the most important to yourself, and speak kindly to yourself, because always one of the things that I like to think about when I'm being very harsh on myself in terms of like work or whatever it may be is that, would I want to say this to my best friend? Would I want to say these words that I'm saying to myself to the people I've recruited? At that point, if I'm being so mean to me and I would never say that to somebody else that I love and care about, I'm not being authentic. And that's terrible. I don't want to live a life like that. And I'm going to note that for myself. That was really good. And treat that when I start reading again. So just being kind to yourself, honoring your feelings, being respectful. We all have a voice. Don't be afraid to use it. Don't be afraid to say something out loud. There's so much power in that, in acknowledging something out loud. It validates it. It makes it human. It makes it a thing. It gives it validation. And that's probably one of the most important things that we can do. In terms of your career, for those of you who are struggling and kind of trying to figure out like, hey, is architecture meant for me, whatever it may be, I'd love for you to stay, but I encourage you to stay only if you can figure out what your why is. So Oprah does Super Soul Conversations, and she had someone talk about a job versus a purpose. And when you think about that, it kind of ties in with another anecdote that one of my project managers mentioned. He was on a job site, or he heard somebody that was on a job site, whatever, and there was a contractor or a subcontractor who was nailing a hammer and like doing something, and somebody went up to him and said, "What are you doing?" And he held up his hammer and he said, "I'm curing cancer," because he was working on a cancer facility. And that whole perspective just changes everything that you do. If you take that energy and redefine why you are here on this earth, why you are waking up to do these things, if you have that why, you're unstoppable. There's nothing that can tell you that you can't do what you're trying to do. So when I'm sitting here and I'm saying like, damn, I can't pass PDD or PPD because I'm so technically dumb or whatever it may be, and I start getting harsh, I remind myself that my why is to bring up more Pacific Islander architects. That's my why. And there are going to be people out there. I know we poo-pooed on the AREs when we talked about it. If you guys are looking at that and be like, damn, they're talking about money, they're talking about all this, they're talking about that. If you have a why like mine, or if you have a why like, hey, I just want to have a license so I can say that I'm an architect, hold on to it. Don't let us stop you. Don't let anybody stop you. Just remember your why, write it down on a Post-it, manifest it. You guys got this. All of you got this. I believe in all of you. I don't know half of you, but I believe in all of you.
And
Yeah.
I am very thankful I got licensed, even though I'm sitting here saying, oh, I might be having this external crisis and blah, blah. And frankly, health issues as far as why I needed to take a break. Like, thank God I have a license to fall back on. I got my license so that I could have the qualifications to know that if I wanted to go do something else, I have a very legitimized professional licensure on top of a very good degree to ensure that if I go and I don't know, decide I want to open an Etsy shop for, I don't know, making paper birds, I can do that and come back and be an architect, you know, like that was my why.
Yeah,
So
I think when
don't let me discourage you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when you accomplish that, when somebody sees the word architect on something, I mean, that's probably why they keep it so exclusive. It really means something. And so I think
It
that
does.
it's like, if you're close, if you're at all close to doing it, like for anybody out there, just to do, you know, once you accomplish that, like no one could take it away from you. I mean, you have to still keep your license up, but nobody
Yes.
can really take it away from you once you've accomplished that. And I think that it helps when, if you are moving throughout different firms, it is so helpful to see that on somebody's resume. It just, you know, says something about the person. If you're staying with the same firm, maybe it's not, you know, people know you already and they maybe already know that you have whatever capabilities. But when you try to move around, you know, beyond just one firm, it really is important.
Yeah, you're right. They can't take that away from that, and especially from an architecture standpoint, the grind that it goes through. We talked about that earlier. Shows the grit you have as a person. So I encourage all of you that are here. listening in. Stay focused, stay with it. It's hard to, it gets dark in that process, in that hole of studying every night, or getting, going on the weekends, and maybe having to leave your family or your friends to go do that, to do that task, and studying for that whatever test is coming up. But stay with it. Find a good resource, a group of people, an ARE boot camp, because honestly, that really helps motivate you to stay on task and stay with the program and the schedule that you may have put in front of yourself to get your goals. Find a support group and I think that applies to any kind of challenge you have in your life. There are so many people in this world that have experienced just countless things that maybe you're also experiencing. And so try and reach out to a support group, and don't be afraid to ask. As Jessica said earlier, it's, just speak up, and, don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. And I'm sure there'll be a support group there for you. So if anybody doesn't have any other questions, I didn't see any other questions come in the chat. I could stay on for another couple more minutes. I know, Jessica, maybe you got a couple more minutes here, but if anybody's got anything else they want to add to the conversation or jump in, now's the time to do it. But I want to thank both of our guests here, Jessica and Shikha, for coming and spending an hour and a half with us. Really great. I mean, a topic that we just touched the surface on and really need to talk about more often with our community of young professionals, but also with the larger audience, as well as Jessica did at the Young Architects Conference. And we need more opportunities like this. So thank you very much to both of you for spending the time here. And I can't express in words the gratitude that these conversations had, and hopefully everyone else felt also inspired by your words. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. I didn't see anything else come in, so appreciate your time once again. And thanks. Have a great evening. Happy holidays, everybody. Be safe. Everybody in the Bay Area, drive safe in the rain. It's not often we get rain, so that's be safe. We've got AIA East Bay. Check our calendar for our next Young Architect and Emerging Professional event coming up in January. We got a membership party on Wednesday. Please join us if you can come in person. It's in Oakland. It's Wednesday night. Check the calendar if you want to register for that. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for sharing.
Night.
Bye.